Welcome to Saga Dream Tales, the place where you can relax, unwind, and drift into calm stories shaped by ancient world. Here, every tale moves slowly, carried by soft words and peaceful rhythm, made to ease your mind and guide you into a quiet space. In today's journey, we drift above the clouds and mist-covered battlefields alongside the Valkyries. We follow these powerful shield maidens of destiny as they soar between the world of mortals and the golden halls of Valhalla. Their path is one of solemn duty, the whisper of fate, and the search for the bravest souls worthy of Odin's hall. All you need to do now is sit back, breathe deeply, and let the story unfold at its own slow pace. Close your eyes if you wish, let your body settle into comfort, and allow yourself to be carried away on the wind to a time when duty was bound to fate, and honor was chosen for eternity. The journey begins now. In the ancient times of the Norse people, when the world was young and magic filled the air like morning mist, there existed beings of great power and beauty. These beings were known as the Valkyries, and their story is one of honor, duty, and the eternal cycle of life and death. The nature of the Valkyries. High above the mortal realm, in a place called Asgard, the gods made their home. Asgard was a realm of golden halls and endless sky, where the mighty Odin ruled from his throne. Odin was the All-Father, the god of wisdom, war, and poetry. He was a god who sought knowledge above all else, and he knew that one day a great battle would come. This battle was called Ragnarok, and it would be the end of all things. To prepare for this final battle, Odin needed warriors. Not just any warriors, but the greatest fighters who had ever lived. These warriors would feast and train in his hall, called Valhalla, until the day of Ragnarok arrived. But how would Odin find these warriors? How would he know who was worthy? This is where the Valkyries came to be. The Valkyries were female spirits, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Some said they were daughters of kings who had pledged themselves to Odin. Others whispered that they were divine beings, born from the very essence of battle itself. Their name meant choosers of the slain, and this was their sacred duty. Each Valkyrie possessed powers beyond mortal understanding. They could fly through the air on horses that galloped across clouds and sky. Their armor shone like the northern lights, brilliant and ever-changing in color. Some wore silver mail that caught the moonlight, while others dressed in gold that blazed like the sun. Their helmets were adorned with wings or horns, marking them as servants of Odin. The Valkyries carried weapons that could cut through any mortal blade. Their spears were said to be forged in the fires of creation itself. Their shields bore symbols of Odin's power, and when they rode together, the sound of their approach was like thunder rolling across the heavens. But the Valkyries were not merely warriors. They were also weavers of fate, working at looms where the threads were made from the guts of men and the weights were human heads. They sang as they worked, and their songs determined who would live and who would die in battle. This weaving was not cruel, but necessary, for the pattern of fate had to be maintained. The halls of Valhalla. Valhalla stood at the heart of Asgard, a hall so vast that 800 warriors could walk through each of its 540 doors standing shoulder to shoulder. The roof was made of golden shields, and spears formed the rafters. The walls themselves seemed to breathe with the memory of countless battles. Inside Valhalla, the chosen warriors lived in eternal glory. These warriors were called the Einherjar, and they spent their days in combat, testing their skills against one another. Each evening, no matter how grievous their wounds, they would rise again whole and healthy. Then they would feast on the meat of a magical boar that renewed itself each day, and drink mead that flowed from the udders of a mystical goat. The Valkyries served these warriors, bringing them their food and drink. But this service was not demeaning. Rather, it was an honor, for the Valkyries were choosing who among the Einherjar would stand where in the final battle. They were studying these warriors, learning their strengths and weaknesses, preparing them for the day when all would be needed. At the head of the hall, Odin sat upon his throne, his two ravens perched on his shoulders. These ravens, Hugin and Hugin, flew across the world each day, bringing him news of all that transpired. His two wolves lay at his feet, and he watched his warriors with his single eye, for he had sacrificed the other eye for wisdom. The Valkyries moved through the hall like streams of light, their presence bringing comfort and inspiration to the fallen warriors. They sang songs of battles yet to come, and they whispered of the glory that awaited those who fought well. The Einherjar loved them, not with earthly passion, but with the deep respect one gives to those who have seen your worth and chosen you for greatness. The ride to battle. When battles raged in the mortal realm, the Valkyries would descend from Asgard. They rode on horses whose coats were white as snow or black as midnight, and whose eyes glowed with otherworldly fire. These horses could run across the air itself, their hooves striking invisible ground and leaving trails of light in their wake. The Valkyries did not ride to every small skirmish or minor conflict. They came only when great battles were fought, when many warriors would fall, and when heroes would be made. They could sense these moments, feeling them as a pull in their immortal hearts, a call that said the time had come to choose. As they rode, the sky would change. Dark clouds might gather, or strange lights might dance across the heaven. The northern lights, which mortals called the aurora, were said to be the reflection of the Valkyries' armor as they rode to war. Sometimes, on the wind, one might hear their war cries, high and clear and filled with a wild joy. The Valkyries watched the battle from above, invisible to mortal eye. They saw each warrior, noting their courage and their skill. They observed who fought with honor and who sought glory through deceit. They marked those who protected their companions and those who fought only for themselves. Every detail mattered, for they were choosing who would join the Einherjar. When a warrior fell, if he was deemed worthy, a Valkyrie would appear to him in his final moments. To this warrior, she would seem to glow with an inner light, more beautiful than any mortal woman. She would reach down her hand, and if he took it, his spirit would rise from his broken body. His wounds would fade, and he would find himself whole again, sitting behind the Valkyrie on her great horse. Then, they would ride, up and up, through the clouds and beyond, until they reached the rainbow bridge called Bifrost. This bridge connected the mortal realm to Asgard, and it shimmered with all the colors that existed, and some that did not. The horses' hooves would ring against the bridge, making music that echoed across the 9 realms. At the end of the bridge, Valhalla awaited, its doors opening to receive the new arrival. The other Einherjar would greet him with cheers and the clash of weapons on shield. The Valkyrie would lead him inside, where Odin himself would acknowledge the warrior's arrival with a nod from his high seat. The individual Valkyries. Among the Valkyries, there were those whose names were known and whose deeds were remembered. Each had her own nature, her own way of choosing, and her own place in the order of things. Brunhild was perhaps the most famous of all the Valkyries. Her name meant battle armor, and she wore her role with fierce pride. Brunhild was known for her strength and her unwavering sense of justice. When she chose a warrior, it was because she saw in him the qualities that would serve the gods well in the final battle. She did not choose the strongest or the most skilled, but rather those who fought for the right reasons, who protected the weak and stood against tyranny. There came a time when Brunhild defied Odin's orders. She had been commanded to ensure that a certain king would win a battle, but when she saw the field, she recognized that this king was cruel and unjust. His opponent was a noble warrior who fought to protect his people. Brunhild could not bring herself to grant victory to evil, and so she chose differently. For this disobedience, Odin punished her. He stripped her of her immortality and her powers, and he placed her in a deep sleep upon a mountain. Around her, he made a ring of fire that would burn any man who tried to reach her. Only the bravest and most worthy of heroes would be able to pass through those flames. And so Brunhild slept, waiting for the one who would wake her. Gundul was another Valkyrie, whose name meant wand wielder. She carried a staff as well as her spear, and she was said to have powers over magic beyond even the other Valkyries. Gundul often chose warriors who had been poets or skalds in life, for she valued words as much as deed. She believed that the stories told about battles were as important as the battles themselves, for stories kept the memory of heroes alive. When Gundul rode to battle, she would sometimes whisper inspiration into the ears of the poets who watched from the sideline. These poets would then create the sagas and eddas that told of great deeds. In this way, Gundul ensured that the worthy would be remembered, even if they were not chosen for Valhalla. Skogul, whose name meant shaker or high towering, was a Valkyrie of tremendous presence. When she appeared on the battlefield, warriors on both sides would feel a chill run down their spines, knowing that death walked among them. Skogul was not cruel, but she was relentless. She shook the world with her presence, reminding mortals that their time was limited and that how they spent that time mattered. Skogul often worked alongside Gundul, and together they would determine the outcome of battle. It was said that when these two rode together, no force on earth could change what they had decided. Kings prayed that they would favor their armies, and warriors hoped to catch their eye. Hilda, whose name meant battle, was perhaps the most warlike of all the Valkyries. She reveled in combat, not from cruelty, but from an understanding that battle brought out the true nature of men. In the chaos and terror of war, pretense fell away, and Hilda could see who a man truly was. Some men became cowards, others became monsters, but some few became heroes, and these were the ones Hilda sought. There was a legend about Hilda, that she could bring the dead back to life to fight again, only to slay them once more the next day. This created an eternal battle, one that would rage until the end of time. This story represented the cycle of violence and revenge, but it also showed how battle was eternal and necessary in the Norse view of the world. Mist, whose name referred to the clouds and fog of battle, was a quieter Valkyrie. She moved through the battlefield like morning mist through a valley, seen one moment and gone the next. Mist chose warriors who showed cleverness and adaptation, those who could think as well as fight. She valued survival instinct paired with honor, for she knew that in Ragnarok, both cunning and courage would be needed. Reginleif, whose name meant heritage of the gods, was said to be closely connected to the divine bloodline. She often chose warriors who had some trace of divine ancestry, no matter how distant. These were men and women who carried the spark of the gods within them, and Reginleif recognized that spark, even when it was hidden beneath generations of mortal blood. There were many other Valkyries, each with her own name and nature. Some focused on choosing warriors of particular types, while others had specific duties in Valhalla itself. Together, they formed a sisterhood of purpose, all working toward the same goal. Preparing for Ragnarok, the weaving of fate. The Valkyries had another role beyond choosing the slain and serving in Valhalla. They were weavers of fate, working alongside the Norns, who were the primary weavers of destiny. While the Norns wove the fate of all beings, the Valkyries wove the specific patterns of battle. In a hidden place, accessible only to the divine, there stood a loom of terrible purpose. At this loom, the Valkyries would gather before great battles. They would work together, singing as they wove. The threads of their weaving were not made of wool or cotton, but of the sinews and guts of fallen warriors. The weights that held the threads taut were human heads, the heads of those who had died in previous conflict. This image was horrifying to mortal minds, but it held a deeper truth. The Valkyries were weaving the pattern of battle, using the essence of battle itself. Those who had died in war became part of the fabric of future wars. Their deaths were not meaningless, but rather became threads in a larger pattern. As the Valkyries wove, they sang songs that determined the outcome of the battle to come. These songs told of who would win and who would lose, who would live and who would die. The pattern they created on the loom was the pattern that would play out on the battlefield. In this way, they controlled the flow of battle, ensuring that the right warriors were tested, and that the worthy would have their chance to prove themselves. But the Valkyries did not weave without purpose or plan. They followed the greater design that Odin had laid out, the preparation for Ragnarok. Every battle they wove served to train warriors, to test them, and to select those who would stand in the final fight. The pattern they created was part of a much larger pattern, one that stretched across time itself. Some stories told of mortals who witnessed the Valkyries at their weaving. These mortals described a terrible beauty in the sight, a recognition that battle and death were part of a sacred order. They came away changed, understanding that life and death were threads in a great tapestry, and that each person's choices determined what part they would play in that design. The love of warriors. Though the Valkyries were divine beings with duties that transcended mortal concerns, there were tales of them falling in love with mortal heroes. These stories were rare, for the Valkyries were devoted to their purpose. But they did happen, and they were always tinged with tragedy. The most famous of these tales involved Brunhild and a hero named Sigurd. After Odin had placed Brunhild in her enchanted sleep behind the ring of fire, she lay upon the mountain for many years. The fire burnt day and night, keeping all away. Birds would not fly over it, and animals would not approach. It seemed that Brunhild would sleep forever. But then came Sigurd, a young warrior of great renown. He had slain a terrible dragon and claimed a cursed treasure of gold. He was the greatest hero of his age, brave and strong and true. When he heard of the sleeping woman behind the wall of fire, something called to him. He felt that he must reach her, that his fate and hers were intertwined. Sigurd rode his horse Grani up the mountain. When they reached the ring of fire, the horse did not hesitate. Together they leaped through the flames which parted before them. The heat was tremendous, but Sigurd's courage was greater. He emerged on the other side unburned, and there he found Brunhild. She lay upon a bed of shields, dressed in full armor. Her beauty was such that Sigurd could only stare at first. Then carefully, he removed her helmet. Her golden hair spilled out across the shields. He loosened the straps of her armor, and as he did, she began to wake. Brunhild opened her eyes and saw Sigurd standing over her. She knew immediately that this was the one who had been brave enough to pass through Odin's fire. She sat up and looked at the sky, seeing the sun for the first time in many years. Then she looked back at Sigurd, and in that moment, something changed. The Valkyrie, who had never known mortal love, felt it bloom in her heart. Sigurd and Brunhild pledged themselves to each other. They shared knowledge, for Brunhild taught Sigurd many secrets of battle and magic, and Sigurd told her of his adventures. They made oaths and promises, swearing that they would never betray each other. For a time, all was well. But fate is a cruel weaver, and the story of Sigurd and Brunhild did not end happily. Through trickery and magic, Sigurd was made to forget Brunhild. He married another woman, and helped another man win Brunhild's hand in marriage. When Brunhild discovered this betrayal, her rage and grief were terrible to behold. The love of a Valkyrie was not a small thing. It was fierce and consuming, and when it turned to hate, it could destroy everything in its path. Brunhild arranged for Sigurd's death, and when he was slain, she threw herself upon his funeral pyre, choosing to die with him rather than live without him. Some said that in death they were reunited, while others claimed that Brunhild returned to Asgard, forever changed by her time as a mortal. This story taught that the divine and the mortal were meant to remain separate. When they came together, tragedy followed. The Valkyries were meant to observe mortals, to choose among them, but not to join them. Their duty was to Odin and to the coming battle, and anything that distracted from that duty brought sorrow. Yet there were other tales of Valkyries who loved mortals, each ending in its own way. Some Valkyries gave up their immortality willingly, choosing mortal life with their beloved, knowing it would be brief. Others kept their nature secret, living among humans for a time before returning to Asgard, leaving broken hearts behind. These stories served as warnings and as comfort. They warned that the divine and mortal realms should not mix, but they also comforted those who loved and lost, suggesting that even the immortal beings could understand the pain of separation and loss. The Swan Maidens. There were tales told of Valkyries who could take the form of swans. These swan maidens would fly down to the mortal realm and bathe in remote lakes and rivers. When they did this, they would remove their feathered cloaks and become women again, their true forms revealed. 3 swan maidens once came to a lake in a quiet forest. They removed their cloaks and laid them on the shore, then waded into the water. The lake was clear and cold, fed by mountain springs, and the swan maidens delighted in its purity. They swam and played, their laughter like music in the stillness. But 3 brothers were hunting in that forest, and they heard the laughter. Curious, they crept closer and saw the 3 women in the water. They also saw the feathered cloaks lying on the shore. The brothers knew the old stories, and they understood what these cloaks meant. If a man took a swan maiden's cloak, she could not fly away. She would be bound to the mortal realm. Each brother took a cloak and hid it. When the swan maidens emerged from the water and found their cloaks gone, they were dismayed. The brothers revealed themselves and asked the women to marry them. The swan maidens had no choice, for without their cloaks, they could not return to Asgard. They could not resume their duties as Valkyries. They agreed to marry the brothers. For several years, the Swan Maidens lived as mortal wives. They bore children, and kept house, and seemed to accept their fate. But they never stopped searching for their cloaks, and they never forgot what they truly were. They would gaze at the sky with longing in their eyes, watching the birds fly overhead. One day, the youngest Swan Maiden was cleaning the house when she found something hidden in the rafter. It was her feathered cloak, dusty and forgotten in its hiding place. Her heart leapt with joy and sorrow both. She knew that if she put on the cloak, she could fly away, but she would have to leave her children behind. The Swan Maiden wrestled with this choice. Her children were dear to her, products of her mortal life, but the call of the sky was strong, and her duty to Odin weighed on her soul. In the end, her divine nature won out. She put on the cloak and transformed into a swan. She flew to her sisters and showed them where their cloaks were hidden. All three Swan Maidens donned their cloaks and took to the air. They circled over the houses where they had lived, where their children cried for them and their husbands called out in vain. Then they flew higher and higher, back toward Asgard, back to their true purpose. This story was told to explain why Valkyries could sometimes seem cold and distant. They were not entirely of the mortal world, and their duties were greater than any personal desire. A mortal who loved a Valkyrie would always face the risk of losing her to the sky. The battle at the end of the world. All the work of the Valkyries, all the warriors they chose, all the battles they wove, led to one moment: Ragnarok. This was the great battle that would end the age of the gods and destroy the world as it was known. It had been prophesied from the beginning, and everything moved toward it like a river flowing to the sea. The signs of Ragnarok's approach would be clear. First would come 3 winters with no summer between them, a time of endless cold and snow. Brothers would fight brothers and families would turn against each other. The bonds of kinship and loyalty would break, and chaos would reign. The wolves that chased the sun and moon across the sky would finally catch their prey, plunging the world into darkness. Then the earthquakes would begin. Mountains would crumble, and the earth would shake so violently that all chains would break. Fenrir, the great wolf who had been bound by the gods, would break free. The serpent Jormungandr, who encircled the entire world in the ocean's depths, would rise from the water and crawl onto land, poisoning the sky with his venom. From the realm of fire would come Surtur, a fire giant with a flaming sword. He would lead an army of fire giants across Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, and the bridge would shatter beneath their feet. From the realm of the dead would come another army, led by Loki, the trickster god who had been bound for his crime. The dead would sail in a ship made from the fingernails of corpses, a horrible vessel that nevertheless could carry countless warriors. All these forces would converge on a plain called Vigrid, a place so vast that it stretched 100 miles in every direction. There, the final battle would take place. In Valhalla, the Valkyries would wake the Einherjar. These warriors who had feasted and fought in preparation for this day would arm themselves one last time. They would put on armor that never rusted and take up weapons that never dull. The greatest warriors who had ever lived would march out through the doors of Valhalla, 800 through each door, forming an army of such size and skill that the earth trembled beneath their tread. The Valkyries would ride at the head of this army, their armor shining with ethereal light. They would lead the Einherjar to Vigrid, where Odin and the other gods awaited. Thor would be there with his hammer. Freya would stand ready with his magic sword. Heimdall, who guarded Bifrost, would sound his horn to signal the battle's beginning. The battle itself would be terrible beyond imagination. God would fight giant, hero would face monster, and the earth itself would become a battlefield. Odin would confront Fenrir, the wolf who had been prophesied to kill him. Thor would battle Jormungandr, the serpent who was his ancient enemy. Each god had his fated opponent, and the outcome had been written long ago. The Valkyries would fight alongside their chosen warriors, no longer observers, but participants. They would face the armies of the dead and the forces of chaos with the same fierce joy they had shown when riding to mortal battle. Their spears would find their marks, and their war cries would ring across the plain. But prophecy was clear about how Ragnarok would end. The gods would fall, one by one. Odin, would be swallowed by Fenrir. Thor would slay Jormungandr, but would die from the serpent's poison. The Einherjar would fight valiantly, but they too would fall. The Valkyries, those eternal choosers of the slain, would make their last choice, and then they would join the fallen. Surtur would sweep his flaming sword across the world, and everything would burn. The earth would sink into the sea, and the stars would vanish from the sky. The age of gods and heroes would end, consumed by fire and water and darkness. The rebirth. But the Norse did not believe that Ragnarok was truly the end. They believed in cycles, in death and rebirth, in endings that were also beginnings. After the fire and the flood, after the darkness and destruction, something new would emerge. The earth would rise again from the sea, green and fertile. The sun would have a daughter, and this new sun would shine even more brightly than her mother had. 2 humans would survive, a man and a woman who had hidden in the trunk of a great tree. From them, a new human race would spring forth, populating the renewed world. Some of the younger gods would survive as well, children and relatives of those who had fallen. They would find the golden game pieces that the gods had once played with, lying in the grass where Asgard had stood. They would build a new hall and begin their rule over the new world. And what of the Valkyries? The stories were unclear about their fate after Ragnarok. Some said they would perish with the gods they served, their purpose fulfilled with the ending of the age. Others claimed that new Valkyries would emerge in the new world, continuing their eternal duty of choosing the worthy from among the fallen. Perhaps the truth was somewhere between. Perhaps the Valkyries were tied so closely to the concept of battle and death that they could not truly end. As long as there were warriors who fought bravely, there would be a need for someone to honor them, to remember them, to choose them for something greater than themselves. In the new world, when battles were fought, people might still see strange lights in the sky. They might hear thunder that sounded like galloping hooves. They might witness dying warriors smile in their final moments, as if seeing something beautiful that others could not perceive. These would be signs that the Valkyries rode still, eternal and unchanging, serving their purpose across the ages. The legacy of the Valkyries. The stories of the Valkyries lived on long after the age of the Norse gods passed. When Christianity came to the northern lands, many of the old beliefs were forgotten or transformed. But the Valkyries remained in memory, too powerful and too vivid to be completely erased. They appeared in sagas and poems, in artwork and carvings. Warriors would swear oaths in their names, asking for the courage to be worthy of their notice. Women would invoke them when facing hardship, drawing strength from these powerful female figures who bowed to no one save the All-Father himself. The image of the Valkyrie became a symbol of many things. She represented the honor found in battle, the nobility of fighting for a worthy cause. She embodied the idea that death in service of something greater was not an end, but a transformation. She showed that women could be warriors and choosers, powerful in their own right. But the Valkyries also represented something darker and more complex. They were reminders that fate could not be escaped, that death came for all warriors eventually. They embodied the terrible beauty of battle, the way it could bring out the best and worst in people. They were neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but something beyond mortal judgment. In the cold northern nights, when the aurora danced across the sky in curtains of green and red and blue, people would remember the old stories. They would imagine the Valkyries riding across the heavens on their great horses, armor reflecting the starlight. They would wonder if somewhere, in a realm beyond mortal sight, Valhalla still stood with its golden roof and spear-rafted halls. They would think of the warriors who had died bravely, and they would hope that those warriors had been chosen. They would imagine them feasting and fighting in Odin's hall, preparing for a battle that might never come, or might come in ways no one could predict. The thought brought comfort, the idea that courage and honor were rewarded, that death in a good cause meant something. The wisdom of the Valkyries. Beyond their role as choosers and warriors, the Valkyries were also keepers of wisdom. They had seen countless battles and witnessed the rise and fall of heroes. They understood the patterns of courage and cowardice, of nobility and betrayal. This wisdom was part of what they brought to Valhalla. When a newly chosen warrior arrived in Odin's hall, confused by his transition from death to this new existence, it was often a Valkyrie who would explain his fate. She would tell him of Ragnarok and of his role in the final battle. She would help him understand that his death had not been an ending but a beginning, that he had been selected for the greatest honor a warrior could receive. The Valkyries taught the Einherjar not just how to fight, but why to fight. They shared stories of heroes past, tales of those who had stood against impossible odds for the sake of others. They spoke of duty and honor, of loyalty and courage. These lessons were more important than any training in weapons or tactics, for they shaped the hearts of the warriors. In some tales, the Valkyries would ride down to the mortal realm not to observe battles, but to deliver prophecies or warnings. They might appear to a king before a great battle, telling him of what was to come. They might warn a hero of treachery in his ranks or advise him on strategy. These visits were rare and always significant, for the Valkyries did not intervene in mortal affairs lightly. One story told of a Valkyrie who appeared to a young warrior the night before his first battle. The warrior was terrified, unable to sleep, convinced he would die the next day. The Valkyrie sat with him through the night, and though she did not promise he would survive, she told him something more important. She explained that every person's life was a thread in the great tapestry of fate. Some threads were long, and others were short, but each was necessary to create the pattern. The length of the thread did not determine its importance. A brave act performed once could echo through the ages, inspiring others long after the actor was forgotten. What mattered was not how long one lived, but how well. The young warrior listened, and his fear transformed into something else. Not confidence exactly, but acceptance. He understood that he could not control whether he lived or died in the coming battle, but he could control how he faced it. When dawn came, he went into battle with a calm heart, ready to meet whatever fate had woven for him. This was the true wisdom of the Valkyries, that death was not to be feared, but the manner of one's living and dying mattered enormously. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act rightly despite fear. That being chosen was not about being the strongest or the most skilled, but about possessing the qualities that would endure beyond a single lifetime. The Valkyries and the natural world. The Valkyries were closely connected to the natural world, particularly to certain animals and phenomena. Their association with ravens and wolves came from Odin himself, who kept these creatures as companion. On battlefields, ravens would circle overhead, and wolves would lurk at the edges, waiting to feast on the fallen. These were seen as signs that the Valkyries were near, observing and choosing. The horse was especially sacred to the Valkyries. Their supernatural steeds were not ordinary animals but magical beings in their own right. These horses could traverse the realms, moving between the mortal world and Asgard, as easily as a normal horse might trot from one field to another. They never tired, never faltered, and shared an almost telepathic bond with their riders. Some stories claimed that on certain nights, usually before great battles, one might see the Valkyries' horses grazing in remote meadows. Their hoofprints would leave marks that glowed faintly in the darkness. Any mortal wise enough to recognize these signs would know that battle was coming and would prepare accordingly. The Valkyries were also associated with particular geographic features. Certain mountains were said to be their earthly homes, places where they would rest when not engaged in their duties. Sacred groves were dedicated to them, places where warriors would come to pray for a worthy death and the chance to be chosen for Valhalla. Water, particularly springs and wells, held special significance. Some springs were called Valkyrie springs, and the water from them was thought to have healing properties. Warriors would drink from these springs before battle, hoping that the Valkyries would notice them and find them worthy. Women would bring sick children to these springs, asking the Valkyries to spare the young ones and grant them long life. The changing seasons were also tied to the Valkyries. Spring, when the earth renewed itself and life returned after winter's death, was seen as a time of rebirth, similar to how the Valkyries granted rebirth to fallen warriors. Autumn, when everything began to die, was their most active season, for this was when the raiding season ended and the great battles of the year were fought. Winter was the time when the Valkyries were said to be most present in Valhalla, training the Einherjar and preparing them for Ragnarok. The long dark nights of the northern winter were perfect for such preparation. and the howling winds were sometimes called the breath of the Valkyries, carrying messages from Asgard to the mortal realm. The different roles in Valhalla. While the Valkyries' most famous role was choosing the slain and leading them to Valhalla, their duties within the hall itself were varied and important. Each Valkyrie had her particular responsibilities, contributing to the smooth operation of Odin's household. Some Valkyries focused on serving the warriors at their feasts. They would move through the hall with massive drinking horns filled with mead, ensuring that every Inhejar's cup was never empty. This service was ceremonial and important, for the sharing of mead was a sacred act, a binding of fellowship between the warriors and their divine hosts. Other Valkyries were responsible for the warriors' equipment. They would ensure that armor remained bright and weapons stayed sharp. They would repair torn mail and replace broken spear shafts. This work was necessary because, although the Inhejar rose each evening whole and healthy, their equipment did not share this magical renewal. The Valkyries' care ensured that the warriors were always prepared for training or for the final battle. Still other Valkyries served as trainers and teachers. They would work with the Einherjar, teaching them new techniques and strategies. A Valkyrie, who had observed countless battles, had much to share, and the warriors who listened to their advice became even more formidable fighters. These teaching sessions were not gentle, for the Valkyries knew that Ragnarok would be the most terrible battle ever fought, and the Einherjar needed to be ready. Some Valkyries served as Odin's personal attendants and messengers. When the Allfather needed someone to carry a message to another realm, or to fetch something from a distant place, he would call upon these Valkyries. They were trusted completely, for they had proven their loyalty through eons of service. There were also Valkyries, whose role was to keep the memories and records of all the chosen warriors. They would maintain the histories of each Einherjar, remembering their deeds in life and their progress in Valhalla. When Ragnarok finally came, this knowledge would be crucial in determining where each warrior would stand in the battle line and whom they would face. The Valkyries also served as mediators among the warriors. When disputes arose, as they sometimes did even among the honored dead, the Valkyries would step in to resolve them. Their judgment was respected, for they represented Odin's will and possessed wisdom that transcended any individual warrior's perspective. In all these roles, the Valkyries maintained their dignity and their distance. They were friendly, but not familiar, helpful, but not subservient. They were divine beings performing sacred duties, and the Einherjar understood this. The relationship between the Valkyries and the warriors they served was one of mutual respect and shared purpose. The prayers to the Valkyries. In the time when the Norse religion flourished, people would pray to the Valkyries for various reasons. Warriors about to enter battle would invoke their names, asking not for survival, but for the courage to fight well, and if death came, to be deemed worthy of Valhalla. A warrior might say a prayer like this: "Let my arm be strong, and my heart be brave. Let me face my enemies with honor, and protect my companions with my life. If I fall, let it be with my sword in hand and my face to the foe. Let the choosers see my worth, and find me deserving of the Hall of Heroes." These prayers were not desperate pleas, but statements of intent. The warrior was declaring his readiness to fight and die well. He was asking the Valkyries to witness his deeds and judge him fairly. There was a stoic acceptance in these prayers, a recognition that death might come, but that how one met it was what truly mattered. Families of warriors would also pray to the Valkyries, but their prayers were more complex. A mother might pray that her son would survive battle, but she would also pray that if death came, he would be taken to Valhalla. This dual prayer reflected the Norse understanding that a warrior's death was both tragic for his loved ones and potentially glorious for the warrior himself. Women sometimes prayed to the Valkyries for strength and courage in their own trials. Though the Valkyries were primarily associated with battle, they were also powerful female figures who had agency and authority. A woman facing a difficult childbirth might invoke their names, asking for the same courage that warriors showed in battle. A woman defending her home against raiders might pray for a Valkyrie's fierce strength. Leaders and kings would make offerings to the Valkyries before major campaign. These offerings might include weapons, armor, or valuables, cast into sacred lakes or buried in holy places. The intent was to honor the Valkyries and ask for their favor in the coming battles. A king who honored the Valkyries hoped that they would look favorably upon his warriors, and choose many of them if they fell. Some prayers to the Valkyries were more philosophical, asking for wisdom about death and fate. An older warrior, near the end of his life, might pray for understanding of the role death played in the grand design. These prayers sought not to avoid death, but to comprehend it, to see it as the Valkyries saw it, as a transition rather than an ending. The Norse people did not expect the Valkyries to answer prayers in obvious ways. There were no miracle stories of Valkyries appearing to save individuals from certain death. Instead, the answer to prayer might come as a sense of calm before battle, a feeling of readiness, or simply the ability to face one's fate without fear. These subtle responses were valued as much as any dramatic intervention. The weapons of the Valkyries. The Valkyries carried weapons of extraordinary craftsmanship and power. Their spears were perhaps their most iconic weapons, long-shafted and sharp-tipped, capable of piercing any armor. These spears were not merely physical objects, but also symbolized the way the Valkyries chose the slain, their spears metaphorically marking those destined to fall. Each Valkyrie's spear was unique, crafted in the forges of divine smiths. Some were decorated with runes that granted them special properties, such as the ability to never miss their mark or to return to the thrower's hand after being cast. Others were inscribed with the names of famous warriors who had wielded them in life before the weapons were claimed for divine use. The Valkyries also carried swords, usually worn at their side. These swords were said to be unbreakable, their edges never dulling no matter how much they were used. A sword carried by a Valkyrie might have a blade that shone with an inner light, illuminating the darkness of battle. The hilts were often wrapped with silver or gold wire, and the pommels might be set with precious stones that caught and reflected light in stunning ways. Shields were another important part of a Valkyrie's equipment. Their shields were both defensive tools and symbols of their authority. Some shields bore the image of Odin's eye, or his ravens, marking the bearer as a servant of the Allfather. Others showed symbols of specific Valkyries, or depicted scenes from famous battles. These shields could deflect any blow, and were said to be as light as feathers despite their strength. Some Valkyries carried axes or hammers, particularly those who favored close combat over the reach of spears. These weapons were devastating in skilled hands, capable of crushing armor and breaking bones. A Valkyrie wielding an axe was a terrifying sight on the battlefield. Her movements precise and economical, every strike purposeful and deadly. Beyond physical weapons, the Valkyries possessed magical abilities that could be considered weapons in their own right. They could cast spells that protected warriors, or that influenced the outcome of battle. They could invoke Odin's power to turn the tide of conflict. Their very presence on a battlefield could inspire one side to greater ferocity, while causing the other side to lose heart. The most powerful weapon the Valkyries possessed, however, was their authority to choose. This was not a physical weapon, but a spiritual one. The power to determine who would die and who would live, who would be honored in Valhalla, and who would pass into the common afterlife. This power was more terrible than any sword or spear, for it determined the ultimate fate of warriors. Warriors would sometimes try to capture or earn one of these divine weapons. Tales were told of heroes who received a spear or sword from a Valkyrie, either as a reward for great deeds or as part of a prophecy. These weapons would serve the hero well, but they always came with a price. The Valkyrie who gave the weapon would mark the warrior's fate, and often these heroes would die gloriously in battle soon after, their deeds worthy of remembrance and their souls worthy of Valhalla. The Hall of Memories. Within Valhalla, there existed a special chamber known only to the Valkyries and to Odin himself. This was the Hall of Memories, a place where all the knowledge of all the warriors who had ever been chosen was kept. The walls of this hall were covered with carvings and runes, each telling the story of a fallen hero. The Valkyries would visit this hall regularly, walking among the memories and learning from them. They would study the patterns of courage and heroism, understanding what made warriors great. They would also note the patterns of failure, the moments when good men fell to pride or cruelty, so that they might better recognize true worth when choosing the slain. In the center of the Hall of Memories stood a great tree, carved from stone but somehow alive. This tree was a reflection of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connected all the 9 realms. On its branches hung shields, each shield representing a warrior in Valhalla. When a warrior fell during the daily training battles, his shield would dim slightly. When he rose again at evening, the shield would glow once more. The Valkyries tended this tree carefully, ensuring that every shield hung in its proper place. They would polish the shields and repair any damage, treating each one with reverence. This work was meditative and sacred, a way of honoring the warriors and maintaining the connection between their mortal deeds and their mortal existence. Sometimes, when Odin had questions about a particular warrior or a battle from long ago, he would summon one of the Valkyries to the Hall of Memory. She would lead him to the relevant carvings, or to a particular shield, and together, they would review the path. These consultations were important for Odin's preparation for Ragnarok, helping him understand which warriors should be placed where in the final battle. The Hall of Memories was also where new Valkyries learned their craft. When a woman became a Valkyrie, whether she was raised from a mortal or born as a divine being, she would spend time in this hall. She would study the histories of the chosen, learning what to look for in warriors. She would come to understand the difference between mere skill at arms and true heroism, between recklessness and courage, between cruelty and necessary violence. An older Valkyrie would mentor the newcomer, pointing out subtle details in the stories. She might show how a particular warrior had hesitated at a crucial moment, not from fear, but from compassion for a fallen enemy. She might highlight how another had charged into impossible odds, not for glory, but to save his companions. These nuances were what separated the worthy from the merely brave. The Hall of Memories was a quiet place, despite the violence of the stories it contained. There was a sense of peace there, a recognition that all these deeds had been witnessed and recorded, that nothing worthy had been forgotten. The Valkyries found solace in this place, especially after particularly difficult battles where many had fallen and choices had been hard to make. The singing of the Valkyries. Music and song were integral to the Valkyries' nature. Their voices were said to be hauntingly beautiful, capable of stirring the deepest emotions in those who heard them. When the Valkyries sang together, their harmonies could be heard across realms, a sound that mixed joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy. In Valhalla, the Valkyries sang while they served the warriors. These songs told of ancient battles and legendary heroes. They sang of the gods' great deeds and of the creation of the world. They sang of Ragnarok and the hope that would come after. These songs served multiple purposes. They entertained the Einherjar, they educated them about the history and cosmology they were part of, and they reinforced the importance of their role. The songs were not always in words. Sometimes the Valkyries would sing in pure sound, melodies that conveyed emotions and ideas beyond language. A warrior listening to such a song might feel the rise and fall of battle, the exhilaration of victory, the sorrow of loss, all without any words being sung. These wordless songs were considered the most powerful, for they spoke directly to the soul. When the Valkyries wove fate at their terrible loom, they sang songs that determined the outcome of battles. These were working songs, with rhythms that matched the movement of the shuttle through the loom. The content of these songs was prophecy and command, weaving not just threads but events themselves. To hear one of these songs was to hear the future being shaped, and only the bravest could listen without feeling fear. On the battlefield, the Valkyries' songs could be heard by those who were dying. A warrior in his final moments might hear beautiful singing, and he would know that the choosers of the slain were near. This singing was both a comfort and a summons, easing the transition from life to death, and calling the warrior's spirit to follow. There were also songs that the Valkyries sang in private, when they gathered together without the gods or the warriors present. These songs were their own, speaking of their experiences, their feelings, the weight of their duty. In these songs, they could express the burden of choosing who would live and die, the sorrow of watching heroes fall, and the pride of serving a purpose greater than themselves. Some mortals claim to have heard the Valkyries singing. These encounters usually occurred in wild, remote places, on mountaintops, or in deep forest. The mortal might hear voices on the wind, singing songs in a language they could almost but not quite understand. Those who heard this music were forever changed, carrying with them a sense of having touched something beyond the mortal realm. Musicians and poets would sometimes invoke the Valkyries when creating their works, asking for inspiration. They hoped that some fraction of the Valkyries' musical gift might flow into their own songs. The greatest skalds, the poets who created the sagas and eddas, were said to have been blessed by the Valkyries in this way. The tests of worth? The Valkyries did not choose warriors based solely on their deeds in battle. They looked deeper, testing the worth of a man's soul. There were stories of how they might test a warrior, appearing to him in disguise to see how he would respond. One tale told of a Valkyrie who appeared to a famous warrior as an old woman by the side of the road. The warrior was returning from a great victory, his armor splattered with blood, his weapons heavy with the weight of the men he had killed. He was eager to return home to celebrate his triumph. The old woman called out to him, asking for help. Her cart had broken down, and she could not continue her journey alone. She was frail and weak, clearly unable to manage on her own. The warrior could see his home in the distance and knew that a feast awaited him. He was tired and wanted rest. He had a choice to make. He could ignore the old woman and continue home, where glory and comfort awaited. No one would blame him. He had already done his duty by winning the battle. Or he could stop and help, delaying his return and expending energy he did not have. The warrior dismounted from his horse and approached the old woman. He examined her cart and saw what needed to be done. For the next hour, he worked to repair it, using materials he carried with him. His hands, so skilled at wielding sword and spear, proved equally capable at this simpler task. When the cart was fixed, he helped the old woman load her belongings and set her on her way. Only then did the old woman's form shimmer and change. She became a Valkyrie, beautiful and terrible, her eyes filled with an otherworldly light. She told the warrior that she had been testing him, wanting to see if his courage and strength were matched by compassion and humility. He had passed the test, and when his time came to fall in battle, he would be chosen for Valhalla. Another story spoke of a young warrior who had never yet proven himself in battle. He was untested, unknown, but he dreamed of glory. One night, a woman appeared at his door, asking for shelter. She claimed to be fleeing from enemies and needed a place to hide. The young warrior's family was poor, and they had little to spare. Taking in a stranger meant sharing their limited food and space. Moreover, if the stranger truly was being pursued, sheltering her might bring danger to the household. It would have been reasonable to turn her away, but the young warrior saw the fear in the woman's eyes, and he could not refuse. He brought her inside, gave her his own bed while he slept by the fire, and shared his portion of the evening meal with her. He stood guard through the night, watching for any sign of pursuit. In the morning, the woman revealed herself as a Valkyrie. She told the young warrior that he had shown the kind of character that was valued in Valhalla. She could not predict when he would die, or whether he would die in battle, but she promised that if he continued to live according to his principles, he would be worthy of being chosen. These tests were not tricks or traps. They were genuine assessments of character. The Valkyries understood that courage on the battlefield was only one aspect of work. They valued kindness, loyalty, honor, and compassion as well. A man who fought brilliantly, but who was cruel to the weak, would not be chosen. A man who was not the most skilled warrior, but who fought to protect others and lived honorably, would find favor in their eyes. The tests also served another purpose. They reminded mortals that the divine was always watching, and that one's actions mattered beyond the immediate moment. A warrior might think that only his battlefield prowess would be judged, but the Valkyries saw everything. How he treated his family, how he responded to those in need, how he conducted himself in victory and defeat. All these things were noted and weighed. The relationship with Odin. The Valkyries served Odin, the All-Father, and their relationship with him was complex. He was their lord and commander, the one who gave them their purpose and their power. They obeyed his commands without question, for they understood that his wisdom was vast and his vision extended far beyond their own. Odin had sacrificed much for knowledge. He had hung himself from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights, pierced by his own spear, to gain the wisdom of the rune. He had given up his eye for a drink from the well of wisdom. He constantly sought to know more, to understand the patterns of fate, to prepare for the inevitable coming of Ragnarok. The Valkyries were tools in this preparation, but they were also more than that. Odin respected the Valkyries in a way that he did not respect many other beings. They were not his servants in the sense of being inferior or subservient. Rather, they were his agents, extensions of his will, but also possessing their own judgments and perspective. When a Valkyrie chose a warrior, Odin trusted that choice, for he had given her the authority and the wisdom to make it. There were times when Odin would consult with the Valkyries before making important decisions. He might ask them about the quality of the warriors in Valhalla, or about patterns they had observed in recent battles. The Valkyries would speak honestly, sharing their insights and concerns. These consultations were not mere formalities. Odin genuinely valued their input. However, Odin was also a god of many aspects, not all of them noble. He could be ruthless and calculating, willing to sacrifice anything for his goal. There were times when he commanded the Valkyries to choose in ways that seemed unjust, granting victory to the unworthy, or causing the death of heroes. The Valkyries obeyed, but not always without inner conflict. The story of Brunhild and her punishment showed what happened when a Valkyrie defied Odin's will. He did not tolerate disobedience, no matter how well-intentioned. The Valkyries understood this, and they walked a careful line between exercising their own judgment and following Odin's commands. Most of the time, these two things aligned, but when they did not, the consequences could be severe. Despite the potential for conflict, there was genuine affection between Odin and his Valkyries. He saw them as his daughters, in a sense, and they saw him as a stern but ultimately caring father. He had given them purpose and power, a place in the grand design of the cosmos. They served him not just from duty but from loyalty, and even love. In the final days before Ragnarok, Odin would spend more time with the Valkyries, preparing them for their role in the last battle. He would share with them his knowledge of what was to come, though even he did not know all the detail. They would stand together, God and Valkyries, looking out over the assembled Einherjar, knowing that soon everything would be tested in the ultimate battle. The lesser-known story. Beyond the famous tales of Valkyries, there were many smaller stories that ordinary people told. These stories were passed down through generations, changing slightly with each telling, but maintaining their essential truths. One such story told of a Valkyrie who became fascinated with a simple farmer. This farmer had never been to war, and had no skill with weapons. He spent his days plowing fields and tending crops, living a quiet life far from the clash of battle. The Valkyrie could not understand why she was drawn to him. She watched him for many seasons, invisible and patient. She saw how he worked from dawn to dusk, how he shared his harvest with those who had less, how he treated animals with kindness and the land with respect. She saw how he sang while he worked, simple songs that made the labor lighter. She saw how he never complained about his lot, or wished for a different life. Finally, the Valkyrie understood. This farmer possessed a different kind of courage. Not the courage of battle, but the courage of living well day after day without glory or recognition. He faced the small trials of life with the same determination that warriors brought to battle. His life was a quiet kind of heroism, one that would never earn him a place in Valhalla, but was no less worthy for that. The Valkyrie never revealed herself to the farmer, but from that day forward, she ensured that his crops grew well and that his family prospered. She had learned that worth took many forms, and while her duty was to choose warriors for Valhalla, she could appreciate virtue wherever she found it. Another story spoke of two Valkyries who became close friends. Friendship among the Valkyries was common, for they shared duties and experiences that no one else could truly understand. These two in particular were inseparable, always choosing to ride together when battles called them to the mortal realm. One day, they arrived at a battlefield where two brothers fought on opposite sides. The battle was the result of a tragic misunderstanding and a manipulative king who had turned sibling against sibling. Both brothers were noble warriors, and both were fated to die that day. The Valkyries watched with sorrow as the brothers met in combat, neither recognizing the other through the chaos and the armor. When the brothers fell, each mortally wounded by the other's blade, the Valkyries descended to choose them. Only in death did the brothers recognize each other, and their grief was overwhelming. The Valkyries, moved by this tragedy, made a decision together. They would take both brothers to Valhalla, but more than that, they would ensure that the brothers were reunited in understanding and peace. In Valhalla, the brothers were initially kept apart, each believing the other had been his enemy. But the Valkyries worked carefully, arranging for them to hear the full story of how they had been manipulated. When the brothers finally met again in Odin's hall, their reunion was bittersweet. They could not undo what had happened, but they could forgive and be brothers once more. The two Valkyries who had enabled this reunion were praised for their compassion. They had not simply chosen the slain. They had healed a wound that extended beyond death. This story taught that the Valkyries were not mere servants of fate, but beings capable of mercy and understanding. The transformation of mortals. There were rare occasions when a mortal woman would become a Valkyrie. This transformation was not something that happened casually or accidentally. It required both extraordinary circumstances and Odin's direct intervention. The stories of these transformations were few, but they were told with reverence. One tale spoke of a shield maiden, a woman who had taken up weapons and fought alongside men in defense of her homeland. She had proven herself in battle many times over, her skill and courage equal to any warrior. When enemies finally overwhelmed her village, she fought to the last, protecting the innocent, even as she knew the battle was lost. As she lay dying, having taken wounds that would have felled many men, a Valkyrie appeared to her. But instead of offering to take her to Valhalla as one of the Einherjar, the Valkyrie made a different offer. Odin had been watching this shield maiden, and he was impressed. He offered her the chance to become a Valkyrie herself, to serve in a new capacity, choosing the slain rather than being among them. The shield maiden accepted, and in that moment, her mortal form transformed. Her wounds healed, her body became infused with divine power, and she gained the knowledge and abilities of a Valkyrie. She was given armor that shone like stars and a horse that could ride the sky. She joined the sisterhood of choosers, bringing with her the perspective of one who had lived as a mortal warrior. This new Valkyrie brought changes to how the choosers worked. She understood, in a way that those who had always been divine could not, what it meant to face death as a mortal. She knew the fear that came in battle, the pain of wounds, the grief of losing companion. This understanding made her choices more nuanced, more compassionate, though no less accurate. Another transformation story involved a Volva, a seeress who could see the future and communicate with spirit. This Volva had dedicated her life to serving her people, using her gifts to provide guidance and wisdom. She had never sought power for herself, only to help others navigate the difficult paths of their life. When her time came to die, Odin appeared to her himself. He recognized in her a kindred spirit, for he too sought knowledge and wisdom above all else. He offered to make her a Valkyrie, not one who would ride to battle, but one who would serve in the Hall of Memories, maintaining the records and helping to interpret the patterns of fate. The Volva accepted, and she became a Valkyrie unlike any other. She did not carry weapons or ride a horse. Instead, she worked with knowledge and memory, helping Odin understand the deeper meanings behind the battles and the warriors they chose. Her transformation showed that there were many ways to serve, and that wisdom was as valued as martial prowess. These transformation stories gave hope to mortal women who dreamed of something beyond the ordinary limitations of their lives. They suggested that exceptional dedication to a cause or exceptional development of skills could sometimes transcend the usual boundaries between mortal and divine. While such transformations were incredibly rare, the possibility that they could happen at all was significant. The end of an age. As the centuries passed and new religions came to the northern lands, the worship of the old gods began to fade. Fewer people believed in Odin and Valhalla, and fewer warriors prayed to be chosen by the Valkyries. This change did not happen all at once, but gradually, like the slow turning of season. The Valkyries continued their work, even as belief in them waned. They still rode to battles, still chose the worthy, still served in Valhalla. But they could feel the change in the world, a shifting of the fundamental forces that had sustained them. The Age of the Gods was ending, not with the dramatic finality of Ragnarok, but with a quiet fading, a forgetting. Some said that the Valkyries grew sad during this time, mourning the loss of the old ways and the old belief. Others claimed they were content, having always known that all things must eventually change and end. Perhaps both were true, for the Valkyries were complex beings capable of holding multiple truths at once. There were stories that as the old beliefs faded, the Valkyries retreated deeper into the hidden places of the world. They could still be glimpsed occasionally, riding across stormy skies or appearing in dreams. But these sightings became rarer with each passing generation. The connection between the mortal world and Asgard grew weaker. the threads binding them becoming thin and frayed. Yet the Valkyries never truly disappeared. They lived on in stories and songs, in the collective memory of the people who had once believed in them. They became symbols, archetypes, representing the honor and courage that people still valued even as they worshipped new gods. A warrior who fought bravely might still be said to have caught the eye of the Valkyries, even if the speaker did not literally believe in their existence. In some ways, this transformation into story and symbol was its own kind of immortality. The Valkyries had always been about choosing what was worthy and preserving it for the future. Now, they themselves had been chosen and preserved, not in Valhalla, but in the endless hall of human memory and imagination. Artists continued to depict the Valkyries long after the old religion had faded. They painted them riding through clouds, serving warriors in great halls, standing as fierce and beautiful guardians. Writers told and retold their stories, sometimes embellishing them, sometimes trying to capture their original essence. Musicians composed pieces inspired by the Valkyries, attempting to recreate the otherworldly beauty of their singing. Modern people, living in times far removed from the age of the Vikings, still felt drawn to the Valkyries. Perhaps it was because they represented something universal. The idea that courage and honor matter, that how we face death reveals who we truly are, that there is meaning to be found even in loss and tragedy. These were truths that transcended any particular religion or culture. Some believed that the Valkyries were waiting, somewhere beyond the reach of mortal sight, for a time when they might be needed again. When Ragnarok finally came, if it ever came, they would ride once more, leading the Einherjar to the final battle. Until then, they endured in the spaces between reality and dream, between past and present, between memory and hope, the eternal cycle. The true power of the Valkyries' story lay not in the specific details of their appearances or abilities, but in what they represented about the Norse understanding of existence. They embodied the cycle of life, death, and rebirth that was central to Norse cosmology. Everything in the Norse worldview moved in cycles. The seasons cycled from winter to spring to summer, to autumn, and back to winter. The sun crossed the sky each day, died in the west, and was reborn in the east the next morning. The world itself would be destroyed in Ragnarok, only to rise again renewed. The Valkyries were part of this endless cycling. A warrior would be born, live, fight, and die. But if he was chosen by a Valkyrie, that death was not an ending. He would be reborn into a new existence in Valhalla, where he would train and feast and prepare for the final battle. Even when he fell in Ragnarok, that too was not the ultimate end, for the world would begin again, and with it, the cycle would continue. The Valkyries facilitated this cycle, standing at the threshold between life and death, between the mortal and divine realms, between one age and the next. They were transition points, transformers who changed fallen warriors into eternal heroes. Without them, the cycle would break, and warriors would simply die without meaning or continuation. This understanding provided comfort to the Norse people. Death was not something to be avoided or feared above all else. It was a natural part of the cycle, necessary, and even honorable if met correctly. The Valkyries ensured that worthy deaths were recognized and rewarded, that nothing of true value was lost when a brave person fell. The cycle also meant that nothing was permanent except change itself. The gods would fall, but new gods would rise. The world would burn, but a new world would emerge. The Valkyries might fade from active belief, but they would endure in story and symbol, ready to return when the cycle brought humanity around to need them again. In this way, the Valkyries were eternal, not because they could not be destroyed, but because they represented something that would always exist as long as there were humans. The need to find meaning in sacrifice, to honor courage, to remember heroes, and to believe that death in service of something greater was not the end but a transformation, the final choosing. As the night deepens and this tale draws to a close, imagine one last scene. Somewhere beyond the reach of ordinary sight, beyond the boundaries of the known world, Valhalla still stands. Its golden roof catches the light of stars that exist in no mortal sky. The sound of feasting and training drifts from its many doors. The voices of countless heroes risen from their beds to continue their eternal preparation. The Valkyries move through the hall, beautiful and terrible, as they have since time immemorial. They carry horns of mead to worthy warriors. They offer advice on tactics and technique. They maintain the weapons and armor that will be needed in the final battle. They sing songs that make the dead remember why they chose to fight, what they fought for, and why being chosen was the greatest honor they could receive. High on his throne, Odin watches everything with his single eye, while his ravens whisper secrets in his ears, and his wolves rest at his feet. He knows that Ragnarok is coming, perhaps soon, or perhaps ages hence. But it is inevitable. Everything he has done, everything the Valkyries have done, has been in preparation for that moment. And somewhere in the mortal realm, wherever that realm now exists, battles are still being fought. They may not look like the battles of ancient times, may not involve swords and shields and spears, but they are battles nonetheless. People still fight for causes they believe in, still sacrifice themselves for others, still display courage in the face of fear. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Valkyries still ride. Perhaps they still watch these modern battles, still choose those who show true worth, still take them to some version of Valhalla that exists beyond human understanding. Perhaps the stories were never meant to be taken as literal truth, but as symbolic truth, representing something real about honor and sacrifice that transcends time and culture. Or perhaps the Valkyries exist purely in story now, which is its own kind of existence. Every time someone tells their tales, the Valkyries ride again. Every time someone honors courage and sacrifice, the Valkyries make their choice. Every time someone faces death with dignity and purpose, the Valkyries witness it and remember. The choosers of the slain, the Maidens of Odin, the riders in the storm, the weavers of fate, the servers in the Hall of Heroes, they are all of these things, and more. They are the embodiment of a worldview that saw honor in battle, meaning in sacrifice, and continuity in what seemed like ending. As sleep comes, as consciousness fades like mist before the morning sun, one might imagine riding behind a Valkyrie, seated on a great horse that gallops across the sky. The mortal world falls away below, becoming small and distant. Ahead lies a golden hall, its doors open wide, welcoming, promising rest and purpose and continuation. The Valkyrie turns in her saddle and smiles, a smile that holds both sadness for what has been left behind and joy for what lies ahead. Her armor catches the light of a sun that never sets, and her eyes hold the wisdom of ages. She has made her choice, and you are worthy. Whatever trials have been faced, whatever fears have been overcome, whatever sacrifices have been made, they have been seen and honored. The horse's hooves make music on an invisible path, a rhythm like a heartbeat, steady and eternal. Other riders appear, other Valkyries leading other chosen warriors. They form a procession, a river of light flowing toward the golden hall. The singing begins, voices blending in harmonies that existed before the world was made, and will exist after it ends. In the hall, a place awaits, a seat at the table where heroes feast. There will be stories to hear and stories to tell. There will be training and preparation, but also rest and peace. There will be fellowship with others who understand what it means to fight for something greater than oneself. Odin will nod from his high seat, acknowledging the arrival, adding one more to the host that will stand when the final battle comes. The Valkyries will continue their work, riding out to make new choices, maintaining the cycle, preserving what is worthy, preparing for the end that is also a beginning. And in this way, the story continues, as it always has and always will. The Valkyries ride, the worthy are chosen, the hall fills with heroes, and meaning is found in the endless cycle of life, death, and transformation. This is their tale, told through the ages, whispered on the wind, sung in the storm, preserved in memory and story and dream. Rest now, as the chosen rest in Valhalla. Sleep in peace, knowing that courage is seen, that sacrifice matters, that worth is recognized and preserved. The Valkyries watch over the night sky, eternal guardians of honor, forever choosing the slain, forever serving their purpose, forever riding the winds of fate. The story ends, but like all true stories, it never truly ends. It waits to be told again, to be remembered again, to inspire again. For as long as there are those who value courage and honor, the Valkyries will live, in whatever form belief takes, in whatever shape stories assume. And so they ride on, through time and memory, through belief and symbol, through the eternal night sky where heroes are made and chosen and remembered forever.